Imagine this. It's 15,000 years ago. You're standing at the mouth of a cave in what is now southern France. Outside, the world is pitch black. No streetlights, no moon tonight, no phone flashlight in your pocket. And somewhere deep inside that cave, 30 meters underground, past narrow tunnels where you have to crawl on your stomach, a group of humans is about to create something extraordinary. Not fire in the way you're thinking. Something else. Something that shouldn't have worked, but did. They dip a hollow piece of sandstone into melted animal fat. They twist a strip of juniper bark into a wick, and they light it. But it doesn't blaze, it doesn't roar. It just glows. Steady, quiet, portable. This is a lamp. And with this small, flickering light, our ancestors crawled through absolute darkness to paint bison, horses, and lions on cave walls that would still be visible 17,000 years later. Here's the question that should stop you in your tracks. How did people with no electricity, no matches, no understanding of chemistry, figure out how to create controlled, sustained light? Light that could last for hours, that could be carried, that could illuminate art meant to outlive them by millennia? We think of light without fire as a modern miracle, something that arrived with Edison and the light bulb in 1879. But that's a lie we've been told by textbooks that skip the most fascinating 20,000 years of human ingenuity. Because technically, yes, and those cave lamps used a flame, but stick with me, because the real story is stranger and more impressive than you think. The ancient world didn't just discover fire. They discovered how to bottle it, shape it, dim it, extend it, and eventually, remarkably, how to create light that had almost nothing to do with flame at all. Let's rewind further. Before lamps, before wicks, there was bioluminescence. Ancient peoples living near coastlines and places, like Southeast Asia and the Mediterranean, noticed something eerie. The ocean itself sometimes glowed. Waves crashing at night would light up an electric blue, caused by microscopic organisms called dinoflagellates. Fishermen in ancient Japan and Polynesia used this glowing water to navigate at night, to find schools of fish, even to signal each other across the water. That's light without fire. Biological light. Millions of years older than any human invention. And our ancestors were smart enough to actually use it as a tool. Then there are fireflies. In parts of ancient Mesoamerica and Asia, historical accounts describe people collecting fireflies in gourds or thin cloth bags to create makeshift lanterns. A jar of live fireflies could produce enough glow to navigate a short path at night. It sounds almost like a fairy tale, doesn't it? But this wasn't fantasy. It was survival engineering, using the cheapest light source available, life itself. Here's a fact that tends to blow people's minds. Some ancient societies discovered that certain fungi glow in the dark, too. Foxfire, bioluminescent fungus growing on decaying wood, was documented by Aristotle, himself around 2,300 years ago. He wrote about wood that glowed cold and steady without any heat, without burning, without smoke. He couldn't explain why. Nobody could, not really. Until the 20th century, when scientists finally understood the chemical reaction, luciferin and luciferase, powering these organisms. But ancient people didn't need the chemistry, they just needed the light, and they found it wherever nature offered it. Now here's where the story gets deeply human. Why did ancient people obsess over light at all? Think about your own psychology for a second. Humans are hardwired to fear darkness, not because darkness itself is dangerous, but because darkness hides danger. Predators, cliffs, enemies, the unknown. Modern psychologists call this nyctophobia when extreme, but a milder version lives in almost everyone, even today. You probably sleep better with a nightlight or your phone screen glowing somewhere nearby. That instinct is not new. It's ancient. It is, in fact, one of the oldest anxieties etched into the human brain. So when early humans figured out how to create or capture light, any light, they weren't just solving a practical problem. They were solving an emotional one. They were pushing back the oldest fear our species has ever known. Every glowing mushroom collected, every firefly jar, every animal fat lamp carried into a cave was an act of defiance against the dark, and by extension, against death itself. Because in the ancient mind, darkness and danger were often the same thing. And that emotional thread is exactly what connects a Paleolithic cave painter to you. Right now, scrolling through your phone in a dim room at 11 p.m., you're doing the same thing they did. You're pushing back the dark with a glow of your own making. The tools have changed, the instinct hasn't moved an inch in 15,000 years. But here's the twist nobody talks about. Some of the most sophisticated ancient cold light technology wasn't accidental at all. It was engineered, tested, and passed down as closely guarded knowledge. And one particular ancient artifact found in a tomb in Egypt has sparked one of the most bizarre archaeological controversies of the last century. A claim so strange that mainstream historians still argue about it. Something referred to as the Baghdad battery, and depictions some researchers call the Dendera light. Let's talk about the Dendera light, because you've probably seen the image somewhere, maybe on a conspiracy documentary, maybe on social media with a caption like, "Ancient Egyptians had electricity." Carved into the walls of the Hathor temple at Dendera, Egypt, there's a relief showing a large lotus-shaped object with a snake inside it, connected to what looks like a cable running to a strange box. Some fringe researchers starting in the 20th century claim this was a depiction of an ancient light bulb, proof that Egyptians had electric lighting thousands of years before Edison. It's a thrilling idea. It's also almost certainly wrong, and understanding why is more interesting than the myth itself. Egyptologists who've studied Dendera extensively point out that the imagery matches a well-documented mythological scene, a lotus flower, giving birth to a serpent, tied to Egyptian creation stories, not electrical engineering. There's no wiring found in any Egyptian tomb, no batteries, no evidence of an electrical grid, and critically, the tombs and temples themselves are covered floor to ceiling in soot from actual torches and oil lamps. If they had electric light, why would they still need to burn oil for illumination while painting these very walls? The soot alone gives away the truth. They lit their sacred spaces the same way they lit everything else, with fire. But here's the twist. Even without electricity, Egyptian and Mesopotamian engineers were doing something genuinely remarkable with light. They were manipulating and directing it using mirrors. Historical and experimental archaeology has shown that ancient builders could have used polished bronze or copper mirrors to reflect sunlight deep into tombs and tunnels where no torch could safely go, since flame would blacken sacred paintings with smoke. Modern experiments recreating this technique have successfully bounced daylight through multiple mirror relays into chambers 30 meters underground, producing a bright, smokeless, flame-free light. That's the real ancient light without fire, not electricity, but optics. Reflected sunlight, redirected with such precision, it could illuminate hieroglyphs, meant to last for eternity. Now let's go back to the lamps, because this is where the real scientific ingenuity lives. That cave lamp from Lascaux, France, wasn't just a rock with fat in it. Archaeologists analyzing residue from over 400 Paleolithic lamps discovered something surprising. Ancient people were experimenting with fuel efficiency. They tested different fats, reindeer tallow, bear fat, even conifer resin, and discovered that saturated animal fats burned longer, cleaner, and with less smoke than others. This wasn't guesswork. It was iterative trial and error science, refined over generations, essentially an unwritten engineering manual passed down by word of mouth and demonstration. And the wick mattered just as much as the fuel. Researchers have found that ancient lamp users used juniper and conifer wood, specifically because their fibers wick fat slowly and evenly, similar to how a candle wick draws melted wax today. This is the same core principle used in oil lamps for the next 10,000 years. Across Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, and Rome, a technology so effective it barely changed until gas lighting arrived in the 1800s. Think about that. A lighting system invented by hunter-gatherers survived, essentially unchanged in principle, for over 14,000 years. That's longer than written language has existed. Then there's a pivotal discovery that historians consider one of the most underrated turning points in human civilization. The wick itself as an invention. Before the wick, fire was wild and immediate. You burned wood, and light happened as a side effect of combustion. But a wick did something profound. It slowed combustion down. It gave humans control over the rate at which fire consumed fuel, meaning for the first time, light could be rationed, predicted and planned around. A lamp with a good wick could burn through an entire night at a steady, calculable rate. This is arguably one of the first examples of humans engineering time itself, because once you can predict how long your light will last, you can plan activities, rituals, and work around darkness instead of surrendering to it. There's a deeper societal shift hiding in this discovery too. Once light could be sustained reliably indoors, human social life began to change. Anthropological evidence suggests nighttime became a distinct social period, a time for storytelling, tool-making, and communal bonding around a controlled light source, separate from the frantic urgency of an open bonfire. Some researchers argue this is where early oral tradition truly flourished, because a small, steady lamp created intimacy in a way a roaring fire couldn't. A circle of faces lit softly, close together listening. So light without fire wasn't really about avoiding flame entirely. It was about controlling it, directing it, stretching it, and eventually replacing parts of it with cleverness, mirrors, bioluminescence, engineered wicks. And that same obsession with controlling light leads us somewhere unexpected, straight into a modern scientific breakthrough that ancient psychology predicted long before scientists proved it. In 2020, researchers at the University of Illinois and several biotech labs made headlines by successfully engineering glowing plants, using bioluminescent genes borrowed from mushrooms and inserting them into ordinary houseplants, making them emit a soft, sustained green glow without any electricity at all. Sound familiar? It should. It's the exact same principle Aristotle wrote about 2,300 years ago when he described glowing foxfire fungus in the forest. Modern scientists didn't invent the idea of light without fire. They finally cracked the chemistry behind something ancient humans had already been using for thousands of years, just without knowing why it worked. This is one of the most quietly astonishing truths in the history of science. Ancient people were often functional chemists and engineers long before. They had the language of chemistry or engineering. They didn't understand luciferin and luciferase, but they understood results. They knew glowing fungus fungus could light a path. They knew certain fats burned longer. They knew mirrors could throw sunlight where torches couldn't go. Innovation didn't require theory. It required observation, patience, and the willingness to keep testing until something worked, which, frankly, is still the definition of science today. And that raises an uncomfortable but fascinating question. How much ancient knowledge did we lose simply because it wasn't written down? Lamp-making techniques, mirror relay systems, fungal light harvesting, these weren't preserved in books. They were preserved in demonstration, in a hand guiding another hand in the dark, in oral tradition passed from an elder to an apprentice. When a culture collapsed or a language died, that knowledge often died with it. Modern archaeologists are essentially reverse engineering, lighting technology that was common, knowledge to a Paleolithic teenager 15,000 years ago. There's a psychological through line here too, and it's worth sitting with for a second. Humans didn't chase light without fire technology purely for convenience. They chased it because fire, for all its power, is dangerous, hungry, and destructive. It consumes what it touches. It fills enclosed spaces with smoke. It can kill you if you're not careful. But a lamp, small, contained, steady, I'm represented something different: control, mastery over an element without becoming its victim. Psychologists studying risk and comfort today describe this same instinct in modern behavior. We don't just want power, we want controlled, predictable power. That's why a candle feels cozy, but a bonfire indoors feels alarming. That instinct is 15,000 years old, and it still governs how we design lighting in our homes right now, from warm, dimmable bulbs to the soft glow of a phone screen at 2 a.m. Which brings us to the most surprising truth of this entire story. We never actually left the era of light without fire. We just got better at it. The LED in your room right now works on a principle astonishingly similar in spirit to bioluminescent. Fungus, a controlled chemical or electronic reaction, releasing energy as light instead of heat, with almost no flame, no smoke, no fuel to burn. Modern researchers are even exploring bioluminescent street lighting, using engineered bacteria, aiming to replace electric streetlights in some cities with living, glowing organisms, literally circling back to the glowing dinoflagellates. Ancient fishermen used to navigate coastlines thousands of years ago. So the next time you flick on a lamp, or watch your phone screen light up your ceiling in a dark room, understand what you're actually part of. You are the latest link in an unbroken 15,000-year chain of humans, refusing to accept the darkness as final. From a cave painter in Lascaux dipping bark into animal fat, to an Egyptian priest angling bronze mirrors down a tomb shaft, to a scientist splicing mushroom genes into a houseplant in a lab in Illinois, it's the same instinct, the same fear, the same defiance, just wearing different clothes across time. Ancient people didn't need electricity to be brilliant. They needed curiosity, patience, and an unwillingness to sit in the dark. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. Not that our ancestors were primitive compared to us, but that they were solving the exact same problem we're still solving today, just with the materials the earth gave them. The tools evolve. The instinct to push back the dark never will. If this story lit something up in your brain the way it did mine, hit subscribe, because next time we're going even deeper into the ancient technologies that shouldn't have existed yet, but somehow did.